Hey everyone, welcome back to this series on art references. This artist, Émile Friant, I had never heard of him before the story that I'm going to tell you all about. And I'm super excited to have known this. The 19th century is so prolific in artwork, the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, that I still get astonished with the level of quality and the expression that those artists bring. And Émile Friant is definitely not a different case. He was born in 1863, which is interesting. Our last video was on John Singer Sargent, and he was born 7 years after Sargent, so he's younger than Sargent, and he died 7 years later than Sargent. So his life was exactly 7 years before after Sargent, which is interesting. Interesting coincidence. I just wanted to point that out, but it's great to see that they probably were in Paris and around Paris at the same time, and this will get more and more interesting as we progress with more artists and establish connections and timelines of where they were. And different from other artists that I probably found out in a book or studying art history, Emile Friant I discovered through AI art, which is crazy. But I'm going to tell that story. It's interesting and it will get a little bit of a perspective on how I feel about AI art as well. So I love these artworks that were made for Uncharted 4. That's what started my whole interest in concept art for video games, everyone that worked at Naughty Dog. And when Uncharted came out and I started seeing people posting, this one is from Nick Gendreau, one of the artists that worked there back in the day. I was super excited about this area that is in Scotland. The gameplay happens around a cemetery. So all the Gothic influences and the architecture and everything were super interesting and super beautiful as well. So the artworks are really beautiful. So back in, I think, August 2023, so almost like 1.5 years ago, I was experimenting with Midjourney. Midjourney is a generative AI tool. And I was experimenting with that to understand where it could get, and it was pretty fresh. The new models were just coming in, and I wanted to see what it could do. So I wanted to see what a cemetery would look like if I would just throw a prompt in there. I asked to do in a style of John Singer Sargent, the last artist we talked about, and it came up with a lot of different options. Crazy options like getting a lot of different influences here on the sculptures from different cultures mixed all together, which is interesting, but at the same time a little crazy and doesn't represent the cemetery in Scotland that I was looking for. And then I had the idea, oh, but I want to see what a funeral would look like, people mourning and everything, painted once again by John Singer Sargent. And I got this. So it's an interesting result. We can see a lot of people dress up. I believe I put something from the era, or just the John Singer Sargent prompt will bring people in certain types of clothes. As I have the Scottish, maybe it got a little bit of that influence as well. So it brought a little bit of these. I also asked it to come up with vertical cuts, and then it started getting like really interesting. And I thought this was really good. I even shared with some friends. You have a little bit of a composition aspect here with more loose brush work, if we could say that, in here, and go into more detail here. So your eye will go this way with all the contrast and everything. And then up here, once again, loose brushwork. And even in the architecture, you have more looseness and you get the eye where it needs to go. But this created a question in my mind. What would a master from that era do, and how would they represent a funeral? And then I Googled it and I got this. And I was like, wow, this tells a lot about AI art and how generic it is and how horrible and everything it is. This is what you should have from a painting about a funeral. It's called Sorrow or La Douleur. I don't know how to say that. And it's so beautiful. I love these detail. If we look closer, we can see a little more of those details. There's a little bit of a tint over it, probably old varnish. We'll see that the color changes when we have a picture from an exhibition more to the end of the video. But we can already see the use of values grouped together. That is super interesting. We can see that also in a study done for this painting. The connection of all the values in the drapery is super interesting and super beautiful. The emotions that got to the end piece here. This is so amazing. Like I can't even compare those two things. I want to bring them up so that we are more curious about art history than what like a generic generative tool will come up with. This reminded me of a painting that I saw in Vienna from Gustav Klimt, another artist that I really want to bring here someday. And this has also a lot of value connection, and the faces are like the main piece. You have even a connection between them, and the values here, the changes of value, the changes of color back there. It's an amazing piece. It was a very good surprise when I got to the Belvedere and I saw that up close. I had never seen this. So every time you go to a museum, also keep in mind that you might be surprised by different artwork. Like if I look at this and I look at The Kiss by Gustav Klimt, I love looking at different things that will bring a lot of energy. This is way more interesting to me than the other one. And I started digging more about Émile Friant because he seemed to convey a lot of emotions. And I found this other one that is called All Saints, and it represents a celebration of All Saints Day, but it also has more of a political kind of approach because they are visiting the deceased from the Franco-Prussian War. And it's also super beautiful. I love all the details on this. Once again, if we zoom in, we can get all the details here on the vegetation. If you've been to the channel long enough, you know I love vegetation paintings, and I love admiring how this was done. This gentleman over here is awesome. The details back here are put down, so you have more of a grouping of those values and details. Once again, it's very beautiful how this back area, this environment was put together, and the emotion in the faces. The girl giving money to this person over here, you can see the emotion, a little bit of pity with empathy and being proud of what she's doing. You can read all of that through their faces. They are really alive, and it's awesome to see this in a painting. The sketch is also interesting. A lot of connection of values once again, and we're going to talk about the values from Friant over and over. He keeps coming back with this. You can see the final picture versus the early on sketch and how it changed. So it's really interesting. And if you keep digging, you'll find more and more artwork on people, their lives, their expressions, their relationships, how they share food in this case, and even photographs from the studio painting and the relationship between him and the model. It tells a lot about people in those relationships. I love this photograph. Once again, you can see a little bit of the sketches back there, his palette, his easel, and everything is giving us his palette over here as well. Here is the box with all the paints, but the big palette over here, it's it gives you context of who this person is and everything. This political discussion. Also, this hand over here tells me a lot about the relationship between these two people. These person here, the connection of the eyes. This one is looking at the same thing that this one is. Maybe they're gonna start a fight, and this one is saying, "Let's not do this." You can speculate a lot of things, but it is alive. The painting also technique is very loose in the background and very suggestive and very detailed in the figures. We're gonna see that he does that in drawing portraits as well. You can see the face very well detailed and the rest more suggested, which is really interesting. Other paintings by him, always in this kind of direction of the relationship and the real lives of painters with the model in the studio and the relationship with the result and what's happening. More introspective moments in this one as well, and even some historical, more dramatic things that he will come back with other paintings. I don't know the timeline here. Also, this one is more historical, religious painting. I don't know all the timeline. It would be interesting. I couldn't find a book on him. I'll have two that I did find, but they are catalogs from exhibitions that are no longer available, so they are very expensive normally because of this. I would love to read more on Emil. I'll try and find some stuff and maybe come back to this, do a book review in the future if I'm able to grab a copy or something like that. But now I want to take a moment to look at the values again. Let's go back to this. And I did a little bit of a filter on top of it to connect even more those shapes. As I said, there is probably an old varnish or a very bad photograph in here. We'll see different colors in another photograph of the same painting, but these happens all over the paintings, and we can see in the other one as well that it is this way. If we see other examples like these ones over here, we can do the same kind of filter on top of them and connect all those shapes, all those shadows and value shapes. I love the details on this one. If we zoom in, the colors that you can see in the shadow area are very probably, I'm not 100% sure. If you know, please share in the comments. Impressionist influenced. You can see a lot of purple and reds in here. I don't know how accurate it is based on the real thing. I have never seen this up close, but you can see the variations. But if you go back to the values put together with the filter, everything is really connected. You don't need to do this kind of treatment. You can squint your eyes and you see just squinting a little bit that all the values are gonna connect here as well. You create the focal point. You create the relationship between the eyes, how she is not connected to his eyes, and all the stories that come with that as well. It has to do with the value structure and how we read the picture. This one as well, all the connections in here, even his clothes, you can see uh, within this cave. If you squint once again, only his face will appear here. And I love this painting. I love how he did all the environment and suggested. And we'll see in the end, I don't know for sure the size of this, but it seems to be very small. We'll see one picture that looks like this. That could be it, but I don't know if it's just a study. If you know, please share in the comments. I really want to learn more about this artist. And also saturation, his control of saturation. Once again, we're looking at pictures from the internet, so we don't have the real thing, and colors, values change when you look at the real thing. Once again, we have the connection of the values very close together, and the readability comes this way. But back there, you can see how he controls the saturation so that the eye comes here into the face that are way more saturated than the rest. Details on the figure and more loose background. It's super interesting. It even reminded me of an artist, more contemporary, working in the video game industry, that is Theo Prince. I love this artwork by him. Very loose brushwork in the background, and as you get closer, you get more details. And the palette is reminds me of these kind of almost purple to grays, optical grays, and you get all together, and it really works. This back here reminds me with a little bit of the violet and so on. I love making these connections to people working in the industry nowadays, their influences and everything. I don't know if this is a direct influence, but it reminded me of that. And all this interest in expressions, real life, and the connection between people and how they're living and everything continued to appear a lot in his work. A lot of real things, artists painting, artists thinking about their work in introspective reflections, people in kitchens. Probably he was influenced by other artists that are more of the romantic realist era, and looking at even more a little bit of the surrealism, but grounded in this case in the circus painting, and a lot of expressions, sentiments, and emotions in all of his paintings. We have a process as well for painting on sharing bread, which is what could be more realist than this, more of a political statement than this. And his process is also really interesting. As I said before, he tends to draw a lot, very accurate under drawings before going into full-on paintings. We can see that in a lot of different drawings. And as I mentioned, he focused a lot on the faces, and the rest is mostly suggested. Even, I think this was a commission. Even in this one, you can see more of a face, detailed, and the rest just loose lines sometimes, or a little more detailed, but still not the focal point of this image. This reminds me a lot of the American artist Burton Silverman. This kind of focus on the head and the features, the details, and more of a loose suggestion of the rest of the body. This is a beautiful work. You should definitely look him up if you're interested in portraiture. Some of Friant's sketches tell us a lot about his style and some of the explorations. Unfortunately, these are all low quality. I would love to see them up close. This is from the Danesh Museum in New York City. Unfortunately, this museum has a great collection, but unfortunately, it's not open to public. It just participates in some exhibitions here and there. But if we look in this area over here with a little more zoom, Even though we don't have a very high res image here, we can see a little of the hatching that he uses, and even some of more of a mass against line approach, trying to visualize through very light mass work, masses of value, so that he can understand the relationships between those spaces and masses, which is super interesting. I would love to learn more about his process. If you know, please share in the comments. And I could even find a surrealist painting by him when he was 36 years old here. These women as mountains and the balloon over here. It's interesting to see that he was exploring a lot of different directions. And all this research on Friant got me to the Nancy Museum, which I had also never heard of. I'm from Brazil, so I'm from far away. So it's not usual to find these things. It's 4 hours from Paris, 4 hour drive from Paris, the Museum of Fine Arts in Nancy. And they have a very nice collection, a lot of like household names, Bastien Lepage, you see Claude Monet, Delacroix, Doré, Courbet, Manet, and so on, Voula, that I love. All of names that I want to bring to the channel and discuss someday in the future. But very rich collection. And also they had an exhibition on Friant some time ago in 2016 and 17, which is very interesting to see some of the photographs of the real thing, as I said before. And you can see that probably the varnish was clean for this exhibition. And you can see that the values, even though they are still connected, they are not as connected as we saw before. I would love to see how it looks like nowadays, if it's currently on view there. So if you are from the area, please let me know in the comments. And also we can see the other ones in the size. These compared to the size of this person over here, you can see that it's almost like 1-to-1. So it's a very big painting. And the other ones are also as big as this one. At least this one is. If you compare it to the size of a person over here, it's almost the same of this figure in the painting. But other ones are, as I said before, way smaller. If this is the guy in the cave that we saw, you can see him over here. And even some of the other examples that we saw, the political discussion, I think this is the size of the real thing. And we saw this one in the studio, and we already had an idea. I think it's half of a human size, half of life size. But you can see other ones in here, way smaller, more of a study. And maybe even the connections of the values, they are more easily done in the smaller ones. And you can go far away and see the whole thing and connect the values, which is an interesting speculation about his work. There are books on him, but unfortunately, as I said, the catalog from the Nancy exhibition, it's out of print, so it's very expensive, and all books I could find are expensive as well. I want to see in eBay if I can find some used ones. If you happen to know any, please comment as well. I would love to hear more. And last but not least, I want to talk about another artist that made a sketch in his funeral. So we started with a funeral and we will end the video with another funeral. This artist, Henry Royer, he was a friend of Émile Friant and did these beautiful artwork from his last moments. We'll probably come back to Henry in another video. Let me know if you would love to see that as much as I do, to be honest. I hope this was inspiring. And encourage your curiosity to get to know more artists outside of the ones that we usually hear about. I hope you have a great day, and we'll definitely see each other in other videos. Bye.